Hello, I'm Lars Sage, Gallery Manager of the Art Center of Estes Park. Today I'm interviewing our latest featured artist, Dan Marshall. Dan has been a member of the Art Center since April of 2015. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Lars. Good to be here.
So, what inspires you to draw?
You know, it's a hobby of mine that calms me down. It releases the stress. But to kind of go back, I started drawing when I was a kid, 17. You know, we had those little peachy folders, and I wasn't paying attention in class. I was doodling on that peachy folder and learning how to work with shades and shading and things like that. So I think what inspired me to draw at the beginning is just the fact that it was a release for me. It was a place to kind of get away, and I felt very relaxed after doing it, and it's still that way today. Doing this art show, it kind of put me a little bit into a little higher mode of not being relaxed, because I had some deadlines, and then the evacuation happened, and I wasn't quite done with that train yet, the Jupiter train there, and then with the evacuation, I'm like, man, I'm definitely not going to get it done. So there was a little less of the relaxation this time around, and a little bit more stress, but otherwise I love it. I just hide myself away in a nice sunny room, and before you know it, 3 hours has gone by, and I'm just enjoying the day. Yeah.
Well, sometimes those deadlines do have a little impact on how you approach
They
your
do.
art.
They do.
So, did you go to school for art?
I did not. I'm pretty much self-taught. When I was, again, doodling on my peachy folder, I was also getting very interested into aviation. I wanted to be a pilot ever since I was a kid, and most of the things I would doodle on my peachy folder was an airplane of some kind or something like that. And so a lot of my drawing early in my life was just drawing airplanes. Back in 1987, the movie Top Gun came out. I was in high school. I bet you that was the best recruiting movie that came out ever, because everybody wanted to be a fighter pilot. So that was one of the first official drawings that I made, was an F-14 Tomcat. I still have that drawing, by the way. I made it on charcoal. I used graphite, and my mom would get these packages because she sold Avon, and it would have this great paper, and it was long and able to be used. And usually you get the 8.5 by 11 paper, but I didn't have the big paper, so I would take that paper and I would draw on it. So that's kind of how I self-started. And then I would kind of look at other people's art, and I would read books and things like that. But it wasn't until college where I actually took a art class, and it was just because it was an elective. I had to take an art class. I'm like, oh, this should be pretty easy, right? It wasn't. No, I had a lot of difficulty with trying to understand the color part of it, and the pastels, or I'm not the pastels, but the acrylic and the oils and things like that. And things were on deadlines. Remember, I told you before, I don't do well with deadlines. I tend to rush things. And I was floating around with a C and a D in that class, and finally the teacher came up to me and says, well, what do you like to draw? And I says, I like to draw airplanes. I use graphite. And he says, well, do something for me, bring it in, and it bumped my grade up to a C. So that was the only art class I actually officially took.
What is the difference between graphite and charcoal?
Well, the sheen, and for some of you guys know what sheen is. It's basically how shiny it is. The graphite has a sheen, has a shininess to it, which is cool in some ways. But I really like to get the depth in my drawings. So you bring charcoal in, and it doesn't have any sheen to it. All of the shininess goes away. Any kind of light that goes in, it just disappears. And that's, to me, I think that's the best way to get the shadows that you need, and the depth and the perception that you need of something jumping out of the page. And when I was introduced to those charcoal pencils, I was like, wow, this is what I've been missing to really get that depth. So graduating from all just graphite, I graduated into a little bit of a mix of graphite and charcoal. I combined the two.
Do you do anything else as far as outside of the charcoal and the graphite medium?
I don't. I did do a little bit of pen art in college. I had some folks that wanted me to do some pen art with some airplanes, and I actually, when I was in Air Force training, I had somebody that liked Dungeons and Dragons, and they had this castle they wanted me to draw with using pen. And that was kind of exciting, and that turned out actually better than I thought it would. But I always kind of go back to what I like and what I'm comfortable with. So that's how that came out.
It definitely looks like you're certainly not a pastel artist or a, watercolorist or so forth. It's very definitely charcoal or graphite,
Definitely.
that's for sure.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Do you have any inspirations or using anything different?
I have aspirations to start using pastels.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody had told me that the consistency and the feel of charcoal is very similar to the pastels. So I think after this art show is over, I might start dabbling a little bit into the color pastels come the first of the year and see what that comes out to be like. Now I do throw a little bit of color in some of my art,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just using a color graphite pencil. For example, this F-35, the image that I was going off of when I was drawing this was a color image. And what I really liked and wanted to capture from it was the blue sky reflecting off the top of the skin of the aircraft. So as you can see in this particular example, there's a little bit of blue, but the only color I use is just maybe just a little bit of an accent to accent the picture.
So I guess you already kind of mentioned it, but you switched from graphite to charcoal because of the sheen and the differences there. So do you see it, you also mentioned you've added a little extra color here. Do you see doing kind of still sticking with your graphite and charcoal, but adding more color to it, or you want to just go directly towards full color?
Probably a little bit of both, Lars. I think the question goes around is, am I willing to challenge myself to go completely away from charcoal and try something just pastel? I think because I've used a little bit of color in my graphite or in my charcoal, I think I'm getting that transition to move over, and I think all it just takes is for me to just come up with something and just try it.
Experiment.
That's a good one.
So what was your favorite drawing that you've done?
My favorite drawing that I've done is, and we don't have it up here, but I do have prints of it, and it was a profile of an old cowboy, and I call it storylines.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to capture is I had an uncle and a grandfather my grandfather was a farmer, and one of my uncles was a rancher, and both of them just had that weathered outdoor wrinkled face. But I just remember sitting around and just listening to the stories that they had. And growing up, I always just thought that that's the reason why they have so many stories, is because they have so many wrinkles. And I just put that in my mind. So we were getting prepared for the Lines and Shape show that we used to do here at the Art Center, and I thought, oh, what a great thing to do for the Lines and Shape is do storylines and have this old cowboy in there.
Mm-hmm.
What was really fun about it is I was scared. Like I said, getting pulled out of my comfort zone. I had never done a profile before of a human. I'm always afraid I'm going to get the eyes wrong or the profile wrong, the nose in the wrong spot or something like that. So it was a challenge, but it was just amazing how it just came to life. And I'd work, I work from left to right, so I don't smudge, because charcoal is it can smudge really easy. And it was just like, it was one of those drawings where I just kept wanting to go back, because every time I'd come back, I'd see what I did. I'm like, whoa, this guy's really standing out. So that's why I think Storylines was one of my favorite drawings I ever did. And then actually, it didn't win any awards in the Lines and Shapes, but I took it down to Greeley, to their annual exhibit that they have in sale, and it took first place.
Oh.
I was floored. I was excited, but I was like, wow, it really grabbed somebody's attention there too. So.
Yeah, I see you do planes and animals and so forth, but we don't really see any human except for that one story. You do any more than just that one, or do you or you just pretty much concentrated on your planes, trains, and animals?
Actually, I did do one. Now, I was in the middle of starting Storylines,
Uh-huh.
and my pastor came over for dinner one night, and he says, "Oh, I didn't know you drew, and I didn't know you drew people." And I'm like, "Well, this is kind of a stretch for me." He says, "Well, would you mind drawing my dad?" His dad had passed away, and he had some pictures of him. He was an old cowboy, and I said, "Sure, I'd love to. Let me give a crack at it." And so I did. So really, what I did is I actually took Storylines down off of my drawing board and did. It's called Jess's dad. That was my pastor's name, is Jess, and did a profile of his dad, and he loves it, and I loved it too, and it's tied up there a little bit with my favorite one, but Storylines for some reason just stands out to me just because it just really grabbed all the wrinkles that he had, and it was just coming to life across the board.
So so in other words, are you saying that trying to draw a human is a little more of a challenge than perhaps a bear or the deer and stuff that
Yeah,
you do?
to put my drawings on a challenge scale,
Uh-huh.
the trains are the most challenging. They take me the longest time. Both of these trains, each one took about 15, 16 hours apiece. And you really want to get the detail in there. There's a lot of detail underneath that engine or across the whole engine. Just everything. So if the drawing has more detail, obviously it's going to take a little bit longer. Second in line is probably the profiles.
Uh-huh.
What's nice is when you're not dealing with aircraft or architecture or trains, you can fudge just a little bit. You don't necessarily have to have that wrinkle right where the object that you're talking about is. You can be a little bit off, or the mustache or something like that, where you kind of have a little bit of wiggle room to go with it. So it doesn't make it as hard to be as detailed, but you still need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go down the line, and I think my bear,
It's right behind you.
yeah, the animals, yep, the animals always before were kind of a challenge for me too, because of the same thing. It's like, I don't want to get the eyes in the wrong place, don't want to get the ear in the wrong place. And I found out that animals are probably one of my most enjoyable because I can get them done very quick. And I can be pretty abstract with it, and even though maybe a shadow looks different than what the image that I'm going off of, that's okay, because it still looks real to what my eye sees it as being. So that's kind of how my order goes as far as challenging. And airplanes go pretty fast for me just because I've been around airplanes enough to know what's where and things like that. So I can kind of, even though there's a lot of detail to them, I can go across pretty quick because I know what's there in real life. So.
Well, certainly evident that you use a lot of detail, and particularly the trains, of course, but even your planes and animals all have a real nice, significant detail to them.
Yeah, thank you.
Just make them stand out. So. You've talked to us about a few of the especially your portraits that were memorable, but are there other drawings that you've done that are memorable to you?
A lot of them. I actually have a book here that I put together, and it's called The Story Behind the Pencil. And inside of it, it tells the story of every one that I've drawn. And each one has a story behind it. And so when you ask me, is there any one particular that stands out? There really isn't. I mean, most recently, I guess, would be, Jess's dad and the cowboy. The reason why Jess's dad stands out and this is going to be really kind of cool, is not only because he asked me to draw it for him, but it was a remembrance of his past father. And one day I was really having a tough time getting his eyes. I was avoiding it. I wasn't going to do his eyes. I want to make sure I got it right. And finally, God just kind of urged me to go back to the drawing board and just draw the eyes. I'm like, all right, okay, I'll do it. So I drew them, and then I texted Jess and said, hey, this is what I did today. And then he texted me back. He says, did you know that my dad passed away 1 year from today? And I just needed some reassurance that he was with the Father. And I said, yep. And it was just, and we give me God bumps, but that I think is probably one of the most memorable of the drawings I've done, just because of that touch of the person that asked me to draw it for them. So pretty cool.
That's cool. That's definitely. Well, thank you, Dan.
You're welcome, Lars.
Trains, Planes, and Animals is on display at the Art Center until December 22nd. And the Art Center is open 12 to 4, Friday, Saturday, Sundays, and Mondays. And also private tours can be arranged if you are uncomfortable coming here with other people here too as well. And they also will be doing a virtual tour of Dan's show, and that will be on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks again, Dan.
Thanks again, Lars. Glad to be
Appreciate it.
here.
All right.